Thanks, Denise, and hello, everyone. As Denise mentioned, my name is Mateo Parsons. I'm Chinook Fund's program director. I use he, him pronouns. And just to share a little bit about me and who I come from, I'm Apache and New Mexican on my maternal grandfather's side. I'm the grandson of indigenous Mexican farm workers on my maternal grandmother's side, and I'm Scottish and English on my paternal side. I'm actually new to the staff at Chinook Fund. I just started in May of this year. But I'm not new to the Chinook Fund community. I'm a member of a couple of former grantees. So I've been in community with Chinook in various ways before joining the staff, and I've been able to see the impact of Chinook Fund's work firsthand, which is a big reason that I am so invested in our mission, which is to seed community-led systemic change by mobilizing resources for and trusting in grassroots social justice organizations across Colorado. So Chinook Fund is a community foundation, but we accomplish our mission primarily by organizing people. So we organize people to raise money from their peers, their families, and their networks, and to grant out those funds to grassroots groups that are organizing in their communities. We were founded almost 40 years ago to combat some of the conservative backlash against some of the social justice gains that were being won by community organizers in Colorado around that time. And since then, we've been building the capacity of organizations fighting for social, racial, economic, and political justice throughout the state. We're able to achieve this impact by using a community-wide democratic process through our Giving Project. We believe that having a diverse volunteer community hold the power to collectively fundraise and allocate our grant funds prevents the duplication of some of the problematic power relationships that exist in philanthropy. It also means that we can move money to long-lasting solutions that build community power. And that's how we work for change rather than charity. Because at Chinook Fund, we believe that long-lasting social change happens when impacted communities wield power from the bottom up. So tonight we have the amazing opportunity to hear from three recent grantees who are all walking the walk in their respective communities, working to heal their people, build grassroots power, and imagine a more beautiful, harmonious, and joyful tomorrow. So before I hand it back to Denise, I just want to thank all of you who are joining us this evening for being here to stand witness to the amazing work of these leaders and their communities, and for supporting our current Giving Project members in their efforts this fall to mobilize resources to support this kind of work. And with that, I will hand it back to Denise.
Thanks, Mateo. Thank you so much for sharing your passion and commitment and a little bit about yourself. Um, I will just kind of go a little bit, take a step back and connect the dots. I'd like to connect dots with all of you. I'm in Chinook. I got involved in Chinook through the Giving Project in spring of 2023. So for all y'all out there, please, as I scroll through, show of hands if you were part of a Giving Project. Welcome. Who's all Giving Project alum out there? Show of hands, emoji, anything. You're out there, let us know, please. We love celebrating. Thank you all for all your work that you've done. That's the journey that I signed up for, and I am just thrilled to be here in this role to serve as a consultant. And part of my brand of Embedo Consulting is to reflect and absorb. And so I really want to absorb your thoughts, this energy, and reflect it out, back out as we collectively learn together tonight. So I thank you for this time and for your participation. And I'm going to go up to what our kind of shared learning goals for tonight are so that you all can get a sense of what we're in for tonight. So for our objectives for tonight, we really want all of you to learn directly from these Chinook Fund grantees about their organizing strategies, victories, and challenges. And for all attendees, all of y'all out there, to get a sense of what grassroots systems change work really looks like in different contexts and understand why that's important. Specifically, as a Giving Project members, think critically about their roles as grant makers and donor organizers. Now, Giving Project members are folks who are live actively raising funds in their network right now for these leaders right now. So this is live, very exciting work. Thank you all out there, first off. And second of all, just make sure that you all engage as well and follow up with these fabulous folks who have spent their afternoons with or evening with us today. So major shout out to everyone. This is a great space. I hope that You will definitely utilize that chat room if you have any questions. As I mentioned, the format, we're going to go through 3 questions and then we'll turn it out to the audience. But we really kind of want to dive in. And with that, we're going to go back. We're going to go back to what Chinook does so well in weaving in social justice work, is really honoring the space that we are in now and how we got here. So with that, I'm going to, I think, click on my thing. Apologies, I want to make sure I pull up our land acknowledgement from Chinook. This was drafted by the community members and the organization staff. So it's a collective effort. I'm going to go ahead and share the land acknowledgement and ask you all to just be in the space that you want to be to absorb. We acknowledge the land and history of this space and are fortunate to gather in today. The Posner Center, where Chinook Fund's office is located, sits on Cheyenne and Arapaho land, who are the original stewards of this land. We acknowledge all other Indigenous tribes and nations who call Colorado home, which include Apache, Shoshone, Ute, Pueblo, Pawnee, Comanche, Kiowa, Zuni, Navajo, and Diné. 48 tribes have called this land home, and we recognize the U.S. public policy that has been used to displace Indigenous communities, erode tribal nation sovereignty, and forcibly assimilate Native individuals into U.S. society. We acknowledge the labor of enslaved Africans and their descendants who worked in this stolen land for the colonists and who continue to disproportionately face economic oppression, racism, violence, and exploitation. We share these acknowledgements to encourage all of us here in the Giving Project, on the Zoom, in this space, to consider how our work in this space and in our daily lives can address these historic and contemporary atrocities perpetrated against Native and African peoples and communities. We invite everyone in this space to recognize their ancestors and the forces of history that brought you here, as well as the work that we are engaged in to support our collective liberation and the liberation of future generations. That feels good. Thank you all. It's nice to be here. We're going to do what I like, and Barclay, I'm going to turn it to you. We are ready to meet the change makers. I know this is like, we went through all the other stuff to get to this point. So thank you all. For you all out there, if you are familiar with the 90s movie classic, Bring It On, the cheerleading movie, this is what we're going to welcome our fabulous, fabulous guests with. Spirit Fingers. Spirit Fingers are gold. Jazz Hands. One of our executive directors goes by Jazz. Jacob Smith is going to be lined up and sharing his insights. Imo Succo is going to be here, and Dre as well. So that's my lame attempt to be a DJ, but I hope you can like turn off your cameras, do a wave, show some love to these fabulous folks, and you know, support them, because it takes some guts to be up here. So let's show them some love, anything you can, emojis. Woo! Welcome, Jacob, Dre, and Imo. Nice to be there. Okay.
Denise, you got so excited, you muted yourself.
Sorry, it was a one-woman show. I so apologize for that. We are going to go ahead and dive in because I just needed to mute myself immediately. That was the spirits above saying, and cut the mic. So we're going to go ahead and start with intros with Jazzy Jazz Jacob Smith, whose pronouns are he, him, and she. And he is the founder and lead organizer for the Denver Black Queer Collective. So let's see, we'll start with that, and then Barclay, is it okay if I jump into the next intro, Jacob? Great. So Jacob, would you please share with the audience everything you can tonight with about yourself? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much. Jacob, or Jazz here. I work within, the understanding as an organic intellectual within grassroots organizing. and relational organizing. I have a history moving from DC with Black Youth Project 100 as working in that space and moving to Denver and been here for a while, but I'm also an executive director of a national nonprofit. So I deeply value the experiences that I have to navigate working within the nonprofit industrial complex, although holding the powerful movement and relational organizing strategies that have been proven to be effective within our community.
Thank you, Jacob, for sharing that. It's lovely to have you tonight. Appreciate it. And then we're going to jump to Imo Sacco, whose pronouns are she, her, and she is a director in Indigenous Wellbarity Program. Welcome, Imo. Tell us more, please.
Hi there. So yeah, she ya hai tohi ding shon tohi washing sits up in the shadon na kain additional a hot out the astonishment. So in English, hello, I am of the Water Flows Together clan, born for the Bitterwater clan. My maternal grandfather's clan is the Mountain Code clan, and my paternal grandfather's clan is Mexican clan, and that's how I identify myself as a Navajo woman. So yeah, I'm the director for Indigenous Wellbriety. We've launched on our own as a year ago, so we're now fiscally sponsored. So we're not so much a program, we're kind of building into an organization. And our focus, we are located in Cortez, Colorado, in Southwest Colorado. And so our focus is on providing peer recovery supports and substance use, mental health, and trauma. Predominantly, our target population is Native Americans, but we also have our spiritual relatives and anybody who feels like they need alternative supports for anything along recovery, addiction, just struggling with, mental health supports. So we provide talking circles, and we launched talking circles 3 years ago with the Health Education Center. And we've moved into launching on our own last year, like I said. So we've been running on our own for a year. And we also do street outreach. So our team does street outreach with the street medicine program out of Northern Navajo Medical Center. There's some amazing doctors that do the work about regarding providing on-site medical support, mobile medical units, and our peer coaches provide that support as peer supports also with our unhoused relatives. And so that's how we're operating. We're also building into a new programming in youth. And so I'm currently hiring for peer recovery coaches for youth, a project coordinator, and an elder. And so those are some of the new positions that we're planning to get on board, and just expanding and also collaborating with other organizations locally. And so we've been doing that, and I don't know what else to say. I just love the work that we do. I do the grant writing for our organization, just looking to apply for nonprofit status soon. And other than that, we're a great team. I always tell my team that we're a family. You're the family that I never had. That's what I tell them, because it's interesting as Native people how we build familial relationships on a professional level. And the biggest thing I want to emphasize is that I always say that for the first time in my life, I get to utilize my cultural identity with my work. So that's who I am.
Thank you very much, Imo. And I'm going to turn it over to Miss Dre Chiriboga Flor, and she, ella, are her preferred pronouns, from Justice for the People Legal Center. Please share more about your work, Dre. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And I just want to acknowledge, I know right now is scary times for a lot of our people, and I'm hoping that we can me and my amazing comrades can bring a little bit of light during these times and hope. So I'm Dre Chiriboga Flor. I've been a housing justice organizer for over 10 years now. I worked for 9 to 5 Colorado for 9. They're my sister organization. They're near dear to my heart, and I work with them all the time, every day. I started an organization, Justice for the People Legal Center, about a little over a year ago, because there's a big lack of movement lawyers in Colorado. Movement lawyers are lawyers that help build power of the people and support organizers. And so really what we want to do is train lawyers and weaponize them to make systemic change and hold landlords accountable. So specifically, we work on housing justice work. We've passed wonderful policies for tenants, but if they're not being enforced, there's no point. And so we really believe in helping people assert their rights so that they can actually hold landlords accountable that are, making people's lives unbearable, to be honest. We are one of the lead litigators for the Aurora case that was all over national news about the Venezuelan gangs, which is false narrative. But yeah, just sort of bigger picture. We have about 13 class actions going. I am not a lawyer. I'm a community organizer. I tell lawyers what to do. And that was very intentional to have an executive director that is not a lawyer, to create dynamics that actually make sense for the community. If all of our class actions are certified, we would be covering 85,000 units in Colorado. So that's families. We are a team of 3, so we're small and mighty, and we have our private investigator as well. But yeah, I'm very happy to be here, and I just want to give a shout out to Transformative Leadership for Change. I'm a graduate of their fellowship that has shaped me. Those are my people. And they really made it possible for me to get to this point where I was ready to build my own organization. So I'll pass it back to you, please.
Thank you, Dre. Thank you all for sharing a bit about your passion and your work and where you're at. Folks, I think I have to say this is what Chinook does. This is their initiatives. These are the funds. If you're looking at social justice work that's diving in with Indigenous folks and communities, if you're looking at migrant issues, resource mobilization and justice, language access, and if you're looking at LGBTQ, Black queer support, Black and Brown community development and advocacy, these are the people. So I just want to take a moment to kind of weave it all together and say thank you, Chinook staff, and support and cultivation, recruit, training. Thank you, project members, past and present, for being part of this. This is the work. So thank you all. Let's go ahead and dive into the first question. You'll each have 2 minutes to share. But of course, I think we're actually ahead of time, dare I say, which is really cool, actually. We might have more time to hear from you all, which is great. So the first question, and I'll turn it over to Jacob first, then Imo, and then Dre. The first question is, what are your organization's unique gifts to the struggle or fight for social justice, or whatever word that resonates with you? Folks, I have to be a little bit candid and transparent that when we practiced for this, we actually got in a great conversation and dialogue about the word struggle and fight. So for my background, I'm a Latina, North Denver. That translates in Spanish to, and I'm sorry, Lynette, lucha or fight. I'm going back and forth with the languages, which is in itself culturally woven in. It has depth to it. It has weight to it that's very specific, as it is very specific for Imo, who will probably share a little bit more about how this relates to her, what social justice looks like to her. Same with Jacob and Dre. And so that's really the specificity that I think is exciting about Chinook work and what you all are diving into, because this is authentic engagement and representation. So thank you. And I'll go ahead and repeat the question because I got on a tangent. What are your organization's unique gifts to the struggle, fight for social justice? And we'll turn it to you, Jacob, to share your thoughts. Thanks.
I truly appreciate you starting off with the term struggle, because throughout the collective, something that folks woven into our culture is struggle for the sake of deeper understanding. And so the collective was created to provide a supportive, uplifting, and protective space for Black queer folks in the Colorado community, Denver and surrounding community. And really the work that we're fighting is recognizing that Black queer folks have to actually create the conditions that they want to seek. So oftentimes in LGBTQIA+ spaces, we were talking about safe spaces, we were talking about healing, but what does that look like? And how can we be in a space where we are practicing these tools in order to transform our experience? And so what that looks like is transformative justice workshops. That looks like a culture where we're not only just saying community agreements at the beginning of our meetings, but we're embodying them, to where when conflict does arise, whether if it's conflict, hurt, harm, or abuse, we have the tools and we have the space and the relationship through relational organizing to actually be able to navigate that. And I think the biggest aspect is recognizing that people are seeking these spaces. Black queer folks oftentimes are moving into Denver, or they're in Denver and they're coming into these spaces with despair, saying, how do I find my power? What does power look like? And so the collective is created as a collective. So there's a lot of struggles we'll talk about on why it's a collective and not a 501c3, but is actually being able to struggle together and create these ways of building a community with intention.
Thank you, Jacob. Thank you for sharing that. Imo, will you share your thoughts, please?
Yeah, so when we had our meeting, pre-meeting for this presentation, the word struggle really struck me because I was thinking, why does it have to be a struggle? You know, I've already done a lot of struggling as a Native person, and it's so stigmatizing, and it's kind of like profiling. Stereotyping is what I said, and I was like, not all of us struggle. And Denise shared that it was a fight, and I was like, yeah, that's what it is. I feel like I'm fighting, and so that's what it meant to me. The unique gifts that we bring in our organization is the Native American cultural identity. We've received a lot of the training. We've sought a lot of work and to do the self work. So it's one thing to be Native American, but it's another to be a peer support to other culturally minded individuals, and also be that support not just to individuals but to families. We're not focused just specifically on individual peer recovery. We're also focused on a family support system. So we have our talking circles for individuals, but we also have our events for families, for individuals to bring their families into the art area and do activities from storytelling, art and meditation, different activities where we're bringing in families and reconnecting parents with their children and kind of rebuilding relationships in a different approach. So we're always trying to figure out, what we could do and also be more innovative. And that's one of the biggest things about having the unique gifts to run Indigenous Wellbriety is, the cultural identity piece, the familial bond that we have as a community, and then just to be able to say that we hear you, we know what it feels like as Native people. One of us or all of us have struggled with some sort of discrimination growing up. And it's interesting how we develop our self-stigma as Native people in a predominantly non-Native community. And that's also another thing. I launched Indigenous Wellbriety in Cortez, Colorado. There are this is a border town for most, for first and foremost. So a lot of non-Native living here in the city limits, but we've got Mountain Ute tribe 15-20 miles south of Cortez. We've got the Navajo tribe, which is 45 minutes south and southwest and west, 45 minutes. You're driving into the reservation. And then you've got Southern Ute over in Durango, south of Durango. So you've got a lot of Native American populations and traffic here and other tribal members. And I feel like we have more status. The stats on our population is probably more than Denver, even though the state of Colorado does gather data from, their point. But we are there's high traffic with our Native populations here in Cortez. And so that's another thing that a lot of people don't really recognize. And so there are so many other reasons, and I did some research on it, and I've also launched Indigenous Wellbriety modeled after a program I built in grad school. So I earned my master's in social work 4 years ago. And so just being a single mom and having the kids and struggling, that was when I struggled. I worked full time. I went to school full time, single parent. That was my struggle, but it was also now I'm like doing the fight. Now I'm like, let's do something for our community because not everything is, the Western clinical approach makes me feel a little uneasy. And there's so many labels and so much, discomfort in putting a label on your mental health. And so we use a lot of spiritual terms also. So I think that's it. Yeah.
Thank you both for sharing your personal relationship to that and being very open with all of us. This is a great space. Dre, bring us home with this question. Unique gifts, Dre.
Yeah, so I worked at the Colorado legislature for about 9 years, trying to pass policies, and Godspeed everybody who's still doing that work. Work is so hard. It's so soul sucking, to be honest. And I'm glad to not have to do that work, but appreciate everyone who's still moving that work forward. But yeah, we really realize that if we are not helping people assert their rights, then these policies are really useless. And so doing know your rights trainings, organizing, but also, taking landlords to court. And I, even though we are a law firm, my vision, the world I want to see is that we don't need lawyers, where residents and tenants and mobile homeowners have created so much power that they can assert their rights on their own. They can do collective bargaining to negotiate rent prices, things that are in leases. And, right now, a lot of times we need paid organizers to help form tenant unions and mobile home associations. But in a perfect world, that's not needed. The residents have what they need to be organizers on their own. And so as a community organizer, some of the things I'm doing is mentoring other newer housing organizers. So I'm mentoring someone from 9 to 5, someone in Colorado Springs. I was mentoring someone in Glenwood Springs and in Grand Junction. And so my goal is to equip people and help people learn everything I've learned over the past 10 years, especially about mobile home park organizing. And so, because the goal is to grow the ecosystem, it's not to just grow justice for the people. How can we strengthen all the organizations around us that are building power? And then obviously, movement lawyering and training lawyers, not just lawyers in the housing justice space, but criminal justice lawyers who are representing organizers getting arrested for protests. All those lawyers can be trained to be movement lawyers. How can we use the skills that they have to build the power of the people to help us, in this work that we're doing? And one thing that's important to acknowledge is that in this country, movement lawyering came from the Black liberation struggle, the civil rights movement. That is where movement lawyering was shaped and created. And so that is the legacy. But unfortunately, in Colorado, that infrastructure, that ecosystem doesn't exist currently. There are movement lawyers, but they're few and far between. So we just are wrapping up our 3rd training for movement lawyers. We'll be continuing trainings next year. So yeah, if you have lawyers who are like, they gotta get their shit together, just send them our way so that they can be better allies in this work. And lastly, our vision is to take land and housing off the speculative market forever. We want land and housing to be in the hands of community. We are achieving that right now as we speak. We bought a mobile home park that's on its way to be resident owned in Denver. It's the first park that is going through that. It's 76 homes. It's mostly undocumented Latinx families. And so that is also sort of a gift, a unique skill set that we want to share of how do we take land and housing out of the hands of corporate landlords and into the hands of community, because we know that is the only way to guarantee permanent, dignified, affordable housing.
You did bring us home. literally to affordable housing. Thank you. Thank you, all three of you. I have to capture some themes for the folks. I hear tools. I hear a toolbox and relational organizing from Jacob. I hear cultural identity and talking circles from IMO, and systems change and collective bargaining and trainings and growing ecosystems from Dre. Thank you all. That was awesome. Round two. Next question. Y'all are just thriving. This is really exciting stuff. There is no quiz, by the way. This is everyone's doing great. So we all know. So on that note, a question for yourself, a test for yourself. The question is, how do you know you're building power and creating change? So Dre, would you go ahead and continue on of that about your work?
I think I can give a sort of macro example, and then sort of the smaller kind of wins or changes you see in community. So when I first started organizing, I started organizing mobile home parks because of two parks that shut down in Westwood, in Southwest Denver. 90 families were displaced. At that point, residents had a 10-day notice before their park closed. And mobile homes are not mobile. So we were able to get relocation assistance, but it was a very devastating process for folks, and most of those folks couldn't afford to continue to live in Denver. And after lawsuits, after organizing protests, bugging city council at every single city council meeting in Aurora, going to the Capitol, seeing parks shut down, seeing tragedy hit families. We now have some of the strongest mobile home park laws in the whole country, including opportunity to purchase. So what that means is when a park goes up for sale, the residents have usually about 240 days, depending on if they're able to check a few boxes in terms of some organizing activities, to buy the park before a corporate landlord can come in or someone from the outside. And so since then, that passed in 2020, there have been probably like 15 to 20 mobile home parks that are on their way to be community owned. It really is because of the sacrifice of residents who, even when they lost everything, they continued to fight because they said, we don't want anyone else to suffer from what we have suffered from. And so I just always want to give that history and context of why we have these laws. It was because of residents putting everything on the line to protect their communities, and some of them still losing their homes. And then I think on the micro level, we are in the process of going to administrative court for mobile homes. So we have the Mobile Home Park Oversight Program, which means that residents can file complaints to the state. The state will investigate the landlord. That is a program we created through the legislature in 2019. And I've seen these residents, mostly women of color. We know when women of color lead, everyone wins. That's a fact, especially when Black women lead. In this context, the leaders were mostly Latinx women. And we actually had to go to court in September in front of their landlords, and they had to testify and be questioned by their landlord's attorney, who was a horrible person, very abusive. But to see these women, go on the stand for hours to fight for their community, to argue that what's happening is not fair, was so powerful. And they, of course, said, I never in a million years thought I would be able to do something like that. And now they're leaders in their community, and they're teaching other people how to do the work. And so those experiences where you see people transform and do something incredibly courageous, not just for themselves, but their community, is really what real change, that's why I do this work. That's why this work matters.
Thank you, Dre. Thanks for sharing that. Jacob, take us away with building power, creating change.
I will one day remember that there's a mute button and it doesn't just go with me. But yeah, building power, I grapple with what it means around building power within the collective and how we have crafted an understanding of what building power is. And I'll give example of what that has looked like. So from a standpoint of an organization that is not a 501c3, we were created truly to prioritize building relationships with each other and creating the tools to actually change our material conditions that we see regarding safety, healing, community care, community accountability, and joy, radical joy and holistic joy as part of that. And so when it comes to building power, I see from a macro level from the collective, people being involved in the collective, attending these transformative justice workshops, and then going out to create their own other organization, or going out to create an initiative, or going out to create a healing workshop in themselves, because we know that our community wants to see each other and recognize how they can support each other without relying on systems that have been continuously putting them through oppression, particularly in Denver. As we see, Black communities have always been here, but have been extracted from the ability to make decisions and have that self-determination. And so in the collective, you know, building power, I see it working when we have community conflict that we have never been able to navigate before, or abuse, and people are not just leaving, but there are people who are like, actually, how do we navigate this? What kind of process do we need? Or what kind of tools do we need so that we can find the healing that we need, or we can find the transformation that we need to move forward and still build community? And so I think that is what ultimately is creating change is recognizing that at the end of the day, if the collective is not here 5 years from now, Chinook Fund could be funding a whole lineage of organizations and movements and spaces that might have started with the collective. And I truly think that is what building power looks like, because I'll just end with the context of Black queer folks as they show up into the collective. And the context is that they have their own relationship to leadership, which is oftentimes cis Black men who are perpetuating a nonprofit status. They're showing up where they haven't found an LGBTQ space where they can seek safety and comfort and joy. And they're coming trying to navigate political conditions. Their housing is insecure. They can't afford things. So they're trying to find a space with all these needs and desires. And if we can ground each other in a space where this may not be the container for you to find, you know, free rent, but this can be the container where you can find that community power and learn how to struggle together for understanding and for change.
Thank you, Jacob. Thanks for sharing. Imo, please share your building power and creating change strategies as well.
Yeah, so building power, again, that's a big word. We are so humble. I think that's one of the biggest things that we have as people who have been through a lot on our team. And I think for the most part, we know we're building when we get support from our participants, when they share their experience and what they've done to make the small changes. And so I don't really know exactly what building power means. I'm kind of actually struggling with that, honestly. But I know that creating change is something that we're really driven to do, is to be able to create a space for our Native voices, for our spiritual voices, for people who've been through a lot, and they know that we can identify with them because we know what it's like. We have our own lingo and language that we use, and there's like a universal identity that we have with Native populations. And also, I guess, having non-Native people coming dedicated to these talking circles and to our community events, and saying that they find their place with us, even though, you know, we're all Native, and they really appreciate how they feel at home and part of our community. And so we're so inclusive. They said it's something that they've hardly ever been through. So it's, you know, providing a space, and I guess building the power. How I track it is when people come and reach out to us, when other organizations come to us and ask us to present. We've presented out in Montezuma Creek, Utah. We've presented out on the Navajo Reservation. We visited a detox recovery center in New Mexico. Like, we are always willing to reach out and share our experience, but also know that there are resources that people can launch and utilize, like Wellbriety. So that's an evidence-based Native American approach for peer supports, and that's owned by White Bison. But when I discovered that, I was like, this would be really great to implement within our Native American community because it's evidence-based. And it really does feel like there's the change. How do I know too? Is we're getting the funding. It's we're growing, we're breaking away from the small, being an umbrella, if you will, organization. And now we're planning on building. And there's this term that we use. Brady teaches it's creating a healing forest. So that's basically identifying all our traumas, all our unresolved grief, all our, mental health or substance use. Why? And there's so much layers of different characteristics and behaviors to maneuver, but the bottom line, it always seems, is the historical trauma, the generational trauma. A lot of these behaviors, we don't have them in textbooks. Maybe they do now, but it's something that we can share as Native people collectively and know that certain behaviors are common between us, and that's not common, with the majority population. And so I think for the most part, that's the change that we're creating, and that's the power is the healing forest. We're creating that healing forest. We're learning how to relearn how we communicate with each other. We're learning how to identify our grief and also our traumas, and how do we work with that. And so there's different curriculums that we utilize for that, and sometimes we do ceremonies. Our participants, one of them will ask for a ceremony, and we have an elder on staff, and he provides that for the participants. Sometimes we do our back to school blessing. So so there's so many good events that we have for our community. It's interesting how we're creating the healing forest through everything from individual to the community. So I guess that's, power.
Exciting. Yes. Thank you all. Thank you for sharing what I can just echo out is a lot of intention, a lot of innovation coming from all of your separate strategies, which reflect your community, your constituents you're working with. Exciting stuff. Thank you for sharing. Just have to lift up Radical Joy from Jacob. I think that was exciting. We had a healing forest. And then we had progress through legislation from Dre. That was just like hearing those specific examples from Jacob and Dre. You guys are in the thick of it, so thank you. I'm going to stick with Imo for our last question and have you lead us into diving a bit more into your successes and learnings at Wellbriety, Indigenous Wellbriety.
So the biggest success was probably someone believing in me that I could launch Indigenous Wellbriety. And so I started as a regional health connector with Southwestern Colorado Area Health Education Center. And at that time, the executive director, Kate Hartzell, she was my mentor, and she really believed that I could launch something. And, there's a learning curve that we have, especially as Native people working in a predominantly non-Native community. And, that profession of self-identity of how we present ourselves and who we are, it really does, play a huge part into our psyche. And so when I was working at a mental health outpatient clinic briefly during grad school as an intern, I was sitting there during a clinical staffing, and I was maybe 6-7 months in, and I felt so happy. I was like, yeah, I'm part of the team, I'm going to be a therapist. Yay. And then I looked at everybody, and everybody was not from my community as a Native person. Everybody was non-Native. And it felt like, whoa, my mind went back to my childhood, like the discrimination that I felt during my upbringing, going to border towns, and, that the stereotyping that we have as Native people. and we're less than, and that's how I felt growing up. And so all of those things come back to me, and I'm thinking, oh my God, do I even belong here? Am I even smart enough to be here? I became a teen parent at 17, and I was already labeled as a statistic. And so I was just like, how am I going to do this? And so a lot of those feelings rush back into me from my childhood. And, and then working for a health education center from a director executive director who really believed that I could do the work. And, nobody else has given me that opportunity in my life, has given me that chance to hear my voice and build something from scratch and say that this is something that you can do. I believe in you. And, and she always said, I'm not your supervisor. I'm your colleague. I'm part of your team. And, just having that support really did give me a lot of motivation. And motivation from anybody is great, but when you've been shut down long enough in your life, in your career, it's been interesting to see that, dynamics of self-growth. And then attending a collective leadership initiative training. I think it was last year, it was the 7-8 months. I met other people that, were also like me, coming from different, special backgrounds, marginalized community backgrounds. And it felt so good and uplifting to see that there's other people like me, other people that are wanting to make that change. And, all these learnings that I had along my journey in the past 3 years, it doesn't end. I'm still growing. I'm learning from my team. My team has grown. We've attended so many good trainings. We do retreats. And, a lot of those opportunities are because of what I've been exposed to. And I pick it up and I pick up the best things I can. And then I inform if my team is okay with it. Do they want this? And there's so many great things that they bring that I can't do alone. And so one of the biggest things is also just believing in our team and trusting in our team and being able to say, if we can't do one thing, if they can do another task for us, we all work the same. I don't have a hierarchical system. I have more of everything in a cyclical system where we're all helping each other constantly. And, we fill each other's gaps in different ways in our personalities. And so, yeah, I think that that's one of the biggest things, and the successes is just getting the grants that I wrote. I never thought I could do that. So it's huge. And there's probably a lot more, but these are the top things that come to mind when you asked about successes and learnings, and just learning to grow with my team is one of the biggest things. Self-work, it never ends. It never ends.
We're cheering for you, Imo, and with you and shaking our heads. Yes. Thank you for sharing. Dre, please amplify some of your learnings and sharings and with us as wisdom as well, please.
Definitely one of the biggest successes was on April 30th when we closed on the sale of the Monte Vista Mobile Home Park in Denver. And there's a long road ahead. I just want to be clear about that. Like, it's one thing to live in a mobile home park. It's another thing to run the park and steward the park and the land. But it's messy and it's worth it. And it will be a journey, and hopefully we can use it as a blueprint for other communities who want to do the same thing. Like I said, we have a lot of class actions, and they are going to take 2 to 3 years, sometimes more. We're going to our first jury trial the first week of December for the first certified class action case around warranty of habitability, which is the laws that govern maintenance. That is the second biggest issue tenants face. First is rent increases and rent costs. Second is conditions and living conditions. And so, yeah, so we'll see how that trial goes. But yeah, and in the future, we hope that some of these big cases, like against Greystar, which is the biggest landlord in Colorado, that we're taking to court as well, we'll get money from that we can actually give back to the community and other grassroots organizations who are building power. That is the aspiration. It'll take a few years, but that's what we would like to see. Just in terms of learning, so many learnings, just you've used the word humility and being humble, and like that is so important. I learn every day, and I think, you know, one thing is like absolutely I agree with you, Imo, like having healing, capacity building, like that kind of foundation for our work. We need that in every aspect. Like this work is so hard. It's so hard to make it sustainable. All of us know people who burnt out from the movement, who burnt out from this work and haven't come back, you know. And so how do we help people recover, and then encourage their leadership and help them grow, and you know, sometimes move aside so other leaders can come up and come through. It's one of the reasons I left 9 to 5 is that was the time for me to let other people lead. um and then one other thing, well, first, like also, lawyers are a shield. They're not a silver bullet. Lawsuits are not a silver bullet. The most important thing we can do is organize, period. And I try to make that clear. Let's not put our faith in lawyers. These lawsuits take a lot of time. They are not our saviors. We save ourselves. They don't save us. They are a tool in the toolbox. And then lastly, Jazz, to your point about changing conditions, you know, as an organizer, I've really learned that my job is not to define what is possible. My job is to actually help change the conditions to make them possible. I remember the first time a resident in a mobile home park was like, we want to buy the land. And I was like, oh man, like, I don't know how to tell you, like, it was really hard. And now it's happening. And there have been many successes since then. And so, yeah, it's just like, how do we work to change the conditions to like completely create a future that like at one point wasn't possible? And so, yeah, but every day as an organizer, I talk to new people, I learn new things, and I, you know, try to stay humble and grounded, and yeah, so that I can be open to new realities and new ways of thinking.
Thank you, Dre. Or I hear some marching orders, and folks out there, this is building the work, supporting very specifically what these folks are so good at, and they're really authentically engaging. Like, I don't know if y'all sleep is my next question. That's my personal question. I'm pretty sure you guys are operating, pushing yourselves a lot. So thank you. Jacob, please share more about your work this year and what you're excited and proud of as well.
Yeah, so it's important I always acknowledge sort of like how I got to this point, in terms of the successes of me living in Denver and DC for the past 10 to 12 years, and me navigating such a very different political movement of organizers and spaces. And, you know, I was like, wow, Denver has so much potential, and all my comrades and friends to actually be an organizer that is not trying to fight for a political campaign, you know? And so that was like one of the biggest things is how are we creating a collective where we can let the folks do the political campaigning and all of the changing the policy, but like, how do we center a collective that is focused on creating healing conditions and creating that radical joy? And so some of our successes were like, we started off on Meetup. We're actually still on Meetup right now, but we've gotten some funding to transition to a website. But Meetup is a horrible website, and we garnered to have almost 500 Black queer folks who have signed up, and continuously every day we have folks who are like, hey, how can I be involved in this? What can I do? How can I support? And the success has also been, I will say, being able to create a space where it is moving beyond a theory, you know, into practice. So folks are actually understanding, what does it mean to have community care? What does it mean to have my pod of folks that I can reach out to for support and ask for support? And we're being able to successfully host plenty of transformative justice workshops where people are asking questions of like, do I engage police? Can I? And like being in a space like that where Black queer folks can acknowledge where they are and where they want to be is hard, is rough. And so after you acknowledge that, to be able to practice that has been great. And so I'm proud of those successes. And then I will say some of the learnings. The learnings, where we are right now. I am not afraid to say that it is so important to continue a culture of one-on-ones in relational organizing. because we are actually navigating a moment where there was a stop in one-on-ones and that core base building that allowed the collective to grow. And by stopping that, there were an abundance of approximately 200 Black queer folks who joined the collective and did not have the tools of relational organizing, where they were prioritizing one-on-ones, where they knew people, where they were able to practice community agreements. And so when conflict came, when hurt came, you know, folks that did not have those principles left, didn't know what to do. They reacted in a way which everyone reacts into in their relationship to harm and violence. And so I say that we're now at a stage now to where, as an organization that is not a 501c3, we have stopped receiving money because we know that, hey, we're at the stage in our collective where we have an abundance of interest, but in order for us to create a sustainable, non-hierarchical leadership structure, or a structure that aspires to distribute a leaderful group, then we really have to ensure that the people who are making up these spaces understand what it means to struggle for the sake of deeper understanding. Understand what it means to say, hey, I may be just an individual supporting and hosting this event, but if I hear across the woods in Aurora that there's a Black queer person that got mad at someone else, I know that I'm here to struggle and learn how can I support my community navigating through this. And so it has been difficult, but we have seen the success since 2021 of navigating this, of putting in the principles. And I'm honestly proud, because this is what building power and creating that change looks like when you see the majority of LGBTQ folks experiencing harm in clubs and institutions, where they're experiencing harm in jobs because they don't have the space to build their healing power. They don't have the space to build that community power and navigate those tools. And so hopefully that is some insight into sort of where we are as an organization and where we're headed.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Jacob. Thank you, all three of you. Dynamic leaders. I am seeing you with your strategies of those who, and considerations, those who didn't come back, your one-on-ones. I mean, I'm taking tips. I need to get some organizing. So yeah, the trainings you do. Thank you all. Folks, we're having fun here, but we want to hear from you all. We want to engage with you. I want to see some, hopefully you guys are just ready. Type your questions in the chat. This is the period of the panel where you get to just ask away. You got to hear about what success and challenges look like and how they're navigating. So please go ahead and type your questions in the chat. I'm going to give you folks a moment to do that while we are here in this space and multitask with tech at the same time. All right, so go ahead and keep posting any questions or thoughts as we continue this conversation. We are going to be closing this panel at 7:30, so we're going to do just a couple questions and then close as quickly as we can, thoughtfully, to be respectful of your time. But this is the time to share a question. Okay, I have a burning question because no, I haven't heard it from anyone in the universe yet. So our question, or my question on behalf of staff, is collaborating with social justice organizations. Oh, there we go. Actually, before you dive into that, we actually we've got the questions coming in. Thank you all. I'm going to pause there because I really wanted to be genuine questions from the audience rather than. So, Mateo, I think I'm just going to read the first one out there in Zoom land. This one is from Jenny and for Jacob. Jacob, can you say more about the benefits of a collective versus a nonprofit?
Yeah, really quickly, because ooh, we could do a whole political education on this. But I have had the pleasure of experiencing organization, a national organization, BYP 100, start off as a non-501c3 and evolve over 10 years to become a 501c3 and a 501c4, and have truly, as a leader, seen the struggle of that, and then the collective being birthed out of just a 501c3. And I will say, at the end of the day, most people look at this of like, oh, it's the paperwork, or oh, it is the overwhelming amount of government eyes watching. Government is watching you regardless, unless you're using this, like there's all these symptoms of that. But I will say the benefit of a collective is that it's so much easier to gain a political praxis. And what I mean by that is, in a nonprofit, you inherently have to create a struggle that your people shouldn't have to experience, from my perspective. So once you want your nonprofit to grow, because if it doesn't grow, then that means your community material conditions aren't changing. And so I have seen nonprofits that have grown so large, especially in social movements, even the local organizations, to where they are, and they try to build that community power, and then the community is asking the questions, more and more questions, that start to remove their ability to answer. Because you're now working within you now are the toolbox. You become the toolbox as a nonprofit, and all your tools are in the toolbox, and you don't really understand. And so I would say the biggest thing is the collective. People can imagine outside of the workplace. People can imagine tools and innovation that, without saying, hey, I'm inside this nonprofit and I have to think outside the box in such a way that extracts their resources. And then lastly, I will say, I'm an executive director of a national nonprofit. Please, 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 please do not become a national nonprofit executive director, please. So, stay with your collective. Now, hopefully no one realizes that, but I love my nonprofit, but I will say there's a difference. And I'm glad that we have such a great representation of two amazing other grantees who are struggling with that right now. So I hope that gives some clarity around the benefits of a collective.
Thanks, Jacob, and thanks out there for that fabulous question. Please tap Jacob if you want to hear more. He has an email where we're out there engaged in community, so that is always an option to continue the conversation. I've got a general question for you all, who feels compelled, please just speak up. This one is from Alex, and Alex is curious to learn what the biggest missing pieces currently might be in your work and communities. What needs to be in place to make sure you are thriving and successful in the long term? So, biggest missing pieces currently in your work.
I can take a stab at that first. Funding. I feel like, just going off of what you're saying, Jazz, like the nonprofit industrial complex, like the way funding works, is just very constrictive and limiting. And a lot of the strategies that we want to use are innovative and creative and untested and are experiments. I think organizing inherently is a beautiful, messy experiment. Every single community I work in is different, have different conditions, different people, different personalities. And sometimes, like, life happens, political circumstances change, priorities change. And so when we have funding that's very prescriptive, very like, here are the goals, these are the activities, then we can't actually be community led, because community is very fluid and nuanced and changes. And so having more general op funding, which I know everyone is saying, and it's like everybody knows that, but we really need to see that more, and really just funding us like you want us to win. In TLC, we talked about that, like, what would it look like if we were funded to win and not funded to make one incremental small change. And so yeah, I mean, like, we know nonprofits were created to actually restrict social movements, right? Like, it was supposed to contain it in a way that was, you know, overseen by the government and funded, you know, in a certain way. And there are opportunities to like move beyond that or push the envelope, and hopefully more funders will see that. And I really believe right now this has to be treated like a crisis. What is happening? This is a national crisis. This is like COVID. Like, we need to, we have to defend, we have to respond, and we have to create and move towards a different vision right now, despite all these political challenges. And so I really do hope that as we're thinking about the future, there are risks. Everyone is at risk, but especially our communities and our people who are impacted. And those are the folks we need to center and have lead and define what our goals are in the next few years. And so to do that, we just do need resources. And like, I always think about, like, you know, for executive directors, wouldn't it be cool if we spent like 10% of our time fundraising, and then we could use that time to mentor other organizers, other people in our community to become leaders. But when our time is 70% fundraising, we can't even share those skills that we have. And we all know it's hard to hire like very skilled organizers or like folks that can do this work. It's, you know, in part because people burn out, but also because, yeah, our capacity is tied up with fundraising a lot of times. So yeah, I think a lot of us know these things and, you know, have probably heard them, but that is the reality of the challenges that I'm facing. I think a lot of us are.
Thank you. Jacob Imo, did you want to chime in on that question either? Right, we're just at 7:15 and we have the last, thank you for those questions, audience. And we have more questions. We're at time, and I'm just kind of being thoughtful to get us moving and grooving to one kind of reflective question to kind of, what does it all mean? Where do we go from here? I know we've seen, oh, I sound like an email. Your email box is full of where are we next? Where are we going, right? This is a space like that, but this is for me a little different. And I think it's just because of how authentic Chinook is. I really feel like I'm engaging with the direct people who are going to be impacted by this work because the leaders are so plugged in. So I just really encourage you all to continue these conversations. And folks, I'm just going to close with one last quote for your reflection, and then a question about our collective future, and leave those kind of last thoughts and words of wisdom for you all leaders and change makers out there to close us out. So I'm going to share this quote from the author, activist, and spoken word artist, Walida Imarisha. And they say, all organizing is science fiction because in working for change, we must imagine a world that has never existed. And we have to collectively dream new worlds so that we can begin to create them. So considering this moment we're in and our collective future, what do you, Imo, if you could start us off, and then we'll turn to actually Dre and then Jacob, if you don't mind, just because I want to make sure we're getting Imo's voice. Collective future, what do you imagine and what do you see possible? Imo, if you don't mind. Thank you.
I'm multitasking, so I was answering this question from Beth. And is that the same difference, or?
Yeah, if you don't mind just amplifying it to the audience so we can all have the wisdom. Go ahead and share out where you were with Beth. That would be great.
Yeah, so oh my God, I'm like all over now. So I guess my goals are really to be on our own, to have our own 501c3 status, and also build into the youth programming more and have it be sustainable for our youth, Native youth, and also to collaborate with another nonprofit Native American led organization on different areas regarding healthcare access and what that looks like, and also just building more community, you know. I want to give this to the community and have it be there for them. And I feel like hearing community voices is really what is making this organization sustainable, and also hearing other like-minded individuals who really want to do the work from the heart, and you know, see that and receive the training that they need in order to provide that, you know, that healing forest. So yeah, and of course more money. Who doesn't want more money for this organization? So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Imo. Dre, if you would also share a bit more about Collective Future, imagining to continue, I guess, where you were, both you and Jacob.
Sci-fi. So one of my favorite genres. Yeah, also thinking about Octavia Butler, of course. But I want to bring Therese Howard into the space. She is works for House Keys Action Network Denver. She's been in a homeless or a houseless person activist forever. I've known her since I got to Denver. She's one of the people that truly lives her values. And she taught me the term prefigurative politics, which basically just means like creating the world we want to see in like a microcosm. So like, you know, does that look like creating the utopia we want to see within our organization or within a community or in their neighborhood, even when, you know, we are living within this system, when there still are these barriers, there's still the police, there's still like detention centers, there's all these things, but how can we create and live the values we want to see in the rest of the world in different spaces? And, you know, with this community that's going to be resident owned, like, I feel like that's, you know, I think that's the goal, you know, like, how do we create a culture that is based on like compassion and interdependence and leaning on each other, as opposed to like individualism and, you know, those kinds of values that are like saturated in the rest of society. And so yeah, I just think I try, you know, like, where are the spaces that we can create those like moments of like, this is what we want the world to look like. And I think that just like gives me hope, even if, you know, as a whole, that's not the world that exists, but there's spaces where we can create that vision.
Yeah, for me, I think it's at the end of the day, I am someone who is very big on the term safety and community care and being protected. I mean, my full-time job is in youth safety, but in the collective and in the spaces that we're all abound, I really dislike the term safe space. It is not something that I enjoy because everyone is expecting safety, but many people are not experiencing safety. We're built off of a country that the last thing they want to do is care about us. And the last thing they want to do is care about our safety. And so I envision a world and I envision a space, particularly in Denver, where Black queer folks are leading a culture of actually interrogating what safety is, and actually going into spaces, actually creating and allowing people to interrogate what safety is so that they can actually determine what safety is for them. Because I think at one point, if you can find that safety and have that self-determination to determine what safety is, then ultimately you can start to question other systems that are not providing housing or healthcare or food access. And so that is what I imagine. And I believe that our ancestors have actually led the charge in creating these practices and tools. And so that's all we have to do is look back and create what we need now.
Thank you, Jacob and Dre, Imo. We have a little bit more time because we got through those questions, or that last question, which means we have time for another audience question, I think, Chinook staff, if that's okay with you all. Not sure which one, but I really like getting real questions and real chats at the right time. So let me see. Let's see. We were sharing links on the webpage. I guess we're kind of winding it down. I wanted to see if we could get we really kind of like that. That's the collective dream, right? I guess this is the space. I got to open it up to Dre, Jacob, Imo. Is there anything we didn't cover that you want to share during this time with the audience or with the group out there? Any partnerships, any collaborations coming up, anything else? So I'm just kind of throwing those things out there.
I'll share something.
Sure.
So one of the biggest things we've maintained in collaborating is with street medicine out of Northern Navajo Medical Center. I've written a couple of small grants locally to help our, the supplies that they use, and also different materials and food to our unhoused relatives. And so we've maintained that for 3 years, and we are the only, basically, we were the first organization to really say, let's just get in and help these guys. Let's just collaborate. Let's do some work together. And so it's been interesting to really build into believing into our community, but also that relationship that's really important for our community-based organization. And we also have another collaboration with Pinion Project, which is a family resource center. And this community is actually, it's rural, yes, but we utilize each other's resources so much that, somehow we fill in all these gaps. And somewhere, I can't remember, I read in an article that Southwest Colorado has too many nonprofit organizations. That's really probably true, but I feel like that's what we need, because we don't have a lot of resources out here, a lot of mental health resources. All of our inpatient clinical mental health community centers and hospitals are far away: Grand Junction, Denver, Pueblo. And so that's really important for us to utilize what we have here and see if we can sustain, what we've got going here, but also build more into that. And it'd be nice to see a mental health inpatient or an inpatient substance use center here in Southwest Colorado. But we make do with what we have, so we utilize each other as resources. And I think that's one of the biggest things in focusing on all the supports that we talk about and how we're starting from ground up. It's not really just, for me at least, for our organization, it was just as one thing. It was a lot of different voices, a lot of different supports that are saying, yeah, this is what we need. And I also launched Indigenous Wellbriety on a community level based on surveys and the need for it. It really wasn't like, okay, this is what my community needs, I'm going to launch it. It was like getting that community's approval, right, input, to say, okay, we support this. And so the surveys are there to fill out, to support us, to say this is what the community needs. And so I think I answered that.
Yeah, thank you. That's great. I just want to close with, as a partner supporting this work, as a consultant, one of the things that I get to see with you all is the ecosystem too. And so I just appreciate, Imo, you really bringing that in, because I think that's the piece. That's like the big end piece of the message we want to convey to you all folks out there, is that's where Chinook comes in. That's where this ecosystem kind of thrives, where we all navigate and are strategic. I think that's another thing to really lift up. Imo, you and Jacob and Dre have mentioned some collaborations and how expert community organizers and leaders are necessary to kind of create the landscape of what we're working of our communities, right? So that's just really great stuff. Imo, thank you so much. Thank you, panelists, for sharing your passion, your successes. I heard a lot of growth, a lot of dynamic, a lot of commitment to mentoring and training and developing our leadership for the next generations. That is really inspiring for myself. Truly, I needed that boost. I hope you all out there got your boost, or felt heard, or felt like you want to continue the conversation. If you were moved by this work, please visit Chinook Fund website. We're going to go ahead and close this with a donation ask. Colorado Gives Day is upcoming. The Giving Project, the members are here raising funds for these organizations that you see, these leaders in front of you. They are making this impact. Your dollars are investments. That's what they're doing. So I can't stress that enough. Giving Project, please visit the Chinook Fund Giving website to learn more about the Giving Project. Giving Project members, quick housekeeping, take a 15-minute break, and y'all are going to come back at 7:45. For you all out there in the universe who are still jamming with us, we're going to close you out with some music, or you please enjoy your afternoon, evenings. It was such a delight. Thank you all. I'm doing the heart thing because I'm just so excited to share some energy out and some support and love to you all out there. Thank you. I'm Audrey. Please take yourself off mic and just give yourself a big round of a hand because you are amazing. So celebrate, yay, and have a great day, rest of your evening, week. Thank you. Bye.